How do you make travel interesting? We all want our D&D travel to feel like it's Lord of the Rings. To feel like this. Only that's not a thing you can put into a D&D campaign. I guess you can elaborately describe walking while playing some really good music or whatever. But the thing is, here's the thing. Are you ready for the thing? Those two things are different things. They're not the same thing. But there is something else that Lord of the Rings does to make travel interesting. And it does it brilliantly. Let's play a clip.
We must get up the mountain! Make for the Gap of Rohan! I take the west road to my city!
The Gap of Rohan takes us too close to Isengard!
We cannot pass over the mountain! Let us go under it! Let us go through the mines of Moria!
What was that scene about? The DM, John, presented his players with a choice. Do you continue on this difficult mission to cross the mountain Caradhras, or do you take the road that crosses enemy territory by the Gap of Rohan? Or do you pick another option? Go into the mines of Moria. The players have to choose option A, option B, or option C. They can choose what kind of challenge they want to face. Crossing the mountain would be some kind of skill challenge. You know, accumulating exhaustion on failed saves, taking damage, a lack of rest, like kind of an extended skill test. Crossing enemy territory might be a series of stealth rolls that could result in a devastatingly deadly wave combat if failed. Probably very, very deadly. And entering the mines of Moria is clearly a dungeon crawl. 3 ways forward. Which do the players choose? And it's not just any old choice. The DM, John Rolkin Tolkien, is running his players through a point crawl. Welcome to Mystic Arts, where this may be video number 115 on the channel, but it's script number 69. My name is Daði, I'm a professional writer and director, and I've been DMing for 11 years. A point crawl is a way for a dungeon master to take any journey and break it into points connected by paths. Justin Alexander, in his phenomenal book So You Want to Be a Game Master, describes it basically as the London Underground tube map, designed by Harry Beck, whose mother also took too much Tylenol. Relatable. Joke's on you, I know all the lyrics to every epic rap battle of history. Well, it's basically the tube map. You create points and locations and you connect them with paths, your roads. In our video on the 5 types of exploration, I said point crawls are perfect for running cities. But you can also slap them on top of any structure and turn it into an exciting exploration quest. Point crawls really are just a way for you, the DM, to visualize the journey in a series of choices rather than a time frame that by the end we will have arrived at our destination. Because you literally explore each point and then use available paths to head to the next point, which you then explore. Each point now has become an encounter. Or in the terms of that Lord of the Rings example from earlier, point A is Rivendell, point B is Mordor, and we don't immediately know how these 2 points connect. But we know that our options out of Rivendell are 3 paths, headed to 3 points. The Mountain Caradhras, the Gap of Rohan, and the Mines of Moria. Which path the players choose will decide which point they travel to, which in turn decides what kind of challenge they face. Essentially, when the players pick their path, they pick their encounters. This way, they're the ones making choices. Which brings me to an important point. We're dungeon masters. John Rolkin Tolkien is an author. He gets to spring surprises on the audience, the readers, as much as he wants, because they don't have to play D&D with him. But our audience is our players, so when we ask them to pick between the mountain path of Caradhras, the Gap of Rohan, or the Mines of Moria, we are on the hook for informing their choices. And when they wonder, why can't we just tough it out over this mountain? You, the DM, need to be able to say, hey, you can try, but it's not uncommon for people to freeze to death on their journey. Your characters would understand the risk being potentially fatal if you roll really badly on skill checks and saving throws. Literally tell them what kind of challenge they're going to be facing. You don't need to tell them the exact challenge. You'll get exhaustion every day and you can't rest here. You can imply the hell out of it. Same with the dungeon crawl. Gandalf knows that something's up with Moria. And when the players wonder, isn't it just easiest to go through the Dwarven Kingdom? You can tell whichever PCs have proficiency in history that you know that nobody's heard from the Dwarves of Moria for years now. Nobody knows why. They don't talk to anyone anymore, heavily implying that something went terribly wrong. Your players will put 2 and 2 together, I assume, unless they eat crayons, an underground complex with a mysterious fate. Yeah, that sounds like a dungeon crawl. Then they're making an informed choice. not just arbitrarily picking something. DM wants me to pick a thing, I'll pick a thing. They know they're picking between tough skill tests on one hand, a dungeon crawl on the other hand. Always try to make sure your players have an opportunity to choose between things they understand, things they can wrap their head around. Notice I said tell whomever has a proficiency, not ask for history rolls. I mean, you can ask for history rolls, but you should tell everyone with proficiency in history about the unknown fate of the dwarves, regardless, because that part of the narrative is essential to making an informed choice. So, just offer it up for free. It'll make the game better. The roll can determine if they know about Balin and the dwarves digging too deep, or whether they awaken something in the mine. But just knowing Moria's a dungeon now should be free. It's the only way to make this be an informed choice, so just give it up. In a previous video, I said this. I'm not talking about a party of adventurers going from point A to point B. That's not exploration. That's travel. Travel isn't a game mechanic. It's really just sort of a built-in time skip. I don't think there's a way to make travel interesting, unless you're playing a very different game than this stuff. You might think, oh, there could be a random encounter, and you're right, there could be. But that's not exploration. That's combat, a different pillar of the game, almost unrelated to exploration. And I stand by it. You can't make D&D travel interesting. Not really. There is no good mechanics to work with in D&D about walking good. It's just not what the game is about. In general, you should time skip all travel, literally by blasting the background music as you describe the journey in a handful of sentences. But you can take a journey from point A to point B and turn it into a scary quest, provided the following things are true. 1. The party is traveling through a dangerous area. If the party is moving through safety and on a road, there's basically no reason they can't just be safe the whole time. The Fellowship has to cross a mountain to avoid going through enemy territory. 2. The party's journey will need to be diverted off the road. No matter what route they take, they're going to be challenged. The Fellowship needs to pick between 3 bad options. If there were an easy option, they'd just pick that one every time. And 3rd, you, the DM, can think of several options for fun encounters for each branch of the path ahead of the party. Because the travel isn't the interesting part. It's what happens at the locations we pass through, right? The path in a point crawl is just a line. The locations, the little bubbles, they have all the encounters and they have all the fun. The threat of waves of enemies at Isengard if we go through the Gap of Rohan, or the threat of whatever could possibly be in the mines. If you've got all 3, you've got the makings of a journey-based quest. And here's the wonderful thing. The point crawl can make it so that every part of the journey is full of awesome adventure. Lothlorien leads to Amon Hen, which then Frodo and Sam cross the Eamon Mool, which leads to the Dead Marshes, which leads to the Gates of Mordor. Fairly straight line, except it isn't. Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli go from Amon Hen to the Steppes to Edoras and then to Helm's Deep. They play a whole other point crawl with their own options. In fact, if you look at it, the trilogy is full of moments where the characters are deciding which point to go to.
Get off the road! Quick! Buckleberry Ferry, follow me.
I have no memory of this place.
There's another way, more secret, a dark way.
Proud those who dwell in the mountain.
If you're thinking about how to get travel that feels like Lord of the Rings, don't think about Howard Shore and the helicopter footage. Think about how you need to embrace crossroads. A or B, forward or back, left or right. The whole story is full of choices. It's what makes those journeys compelling. Point crawls are incredibly versatile. You can use this sort of narrative structure for any scenario. The next time you're trying to figure out how to make any travel scenario interesting, break it down into points and paths. Each point becomes an encounter. Now, an encounter doesn't have to mean combat. It's just something that taxes resources like hit points, spell slots, and possibly exhaustion. And because of how versatile this system is, you can imagine taking any journey and turning it into a bit of exploration by layering a point crawl on top. A group that jumps into the sewers to chase the Radagon that stole their magic sword, well, the sewers fork ahead. One path reeks of feces, the other seems cleaner, but sounds louder. Skill test or combat? You choose. The group runs into a massive maze-like mega dungeon that now lies mostly empty. Well, you weren't planning on doing a mega dungeon crawl for the next 4 months. This was just supposed to be window dressing. So one wing of this maze-like dungeon leads to the frictionless hallway, and the other to the warg pits. Now, there's 2 dungeon rooms, several hours of walking apart. Narratively, that's a dungeon, but there is no dungeon crawl mechanic. You're on a ship journey headed from Atroxia to Brightwell, but the continent of Valor is between the two. Do you go north through the Wild Sea, where you know the Sindruki dwarves are searching ships, or do you go south, past the Horn of Valor, where you might have to encounter the Black Pharaoh's forces? Any stretch of wilderness, obviously, you can divide it into evocative areas: Amon Hen, Dead Marshes, Emon Muil, Black Gate, Kirith Ungol, and give them names and stories and make them mandatory in your journey from A to B, from Rivendell to Mordor. You can even have there be required points in your point crawls, like bottlenecks. Any journey from point A to point B must at some point go through the Bloodstone Pass. That's your adventure's midpoint climax. You could build that kind of story beat into the story where they all come together. Those required parts become essential to the shape of the story, which is really where the point crawl thrives, in story-first kinds of campaigns. I think there's a reason you don't ever really see Hexcrawls in actual plays. They tend to rely much more on point crawls. That way, empty hexes are ignored in favor of getting a story beat at every location. The paths are skipped and the points are dwelled upon. It's good for generating stories. Of course, having said that, there's another way to make a vast wilderness interesting. You turn it into a hexcrawl. Take an area like the Elmwood here and put a huge hex grid over it and occupy, around 40% of the 3-mile hexes, and voila, hexcrawl time. I made a video about hexcrawls on this channel and why I think the 3-mile hex is the best method for running hexcrawls. But these 2 methods, hexcrawls and point crawls, are very different. They have very different strengths and weaknesses. I don't think one is better than the other. They're just different tools in your toolbox that you can bust out to solve a problem at your table. Just like everything we talk about on this channel. You can use a hexcrawl when the adventure is about exploring an entire wilderness, where you want to discover the unexpected and go through emergent storytelling, sandboxing, and an open world. You use a point crawl when the point of the adventure isn't the exploration. You want the exploration to get out of the way, and you want to focus on the story beats that come through informed choices. A hexcrawl is a lot of work. It requires extensive prep, making a whole hex map and occupying it with loads of points of interest. Whereas a point crawl is much easier, and you can make them in your head in the middle of a session. You can see that the players are deciding to go on a journey and you quickly want to make it interesting. Just add an informed choice in there. If you take the shortcut through the haunted forest, you'll get there a week earlier, if you get there at all, and then you let your players choose. But that's not going to immediately make your campaign about exploration. It's an add-on, a plugin, and it's always going to feel more like an add-on than something like a hexcrawl, which is a story engine, a dedicated solution for the entire campaign, something that creates new stories. What's right for your game is up to you. If you're running something like the Arcane Infinitum, the sponsor of today's video, you'll have to judge per adventure. This 240-page PDF has 8 distinct themes, each of which is a self-contained content pack you can drop right into your next game. Each theme contains an adventure you can run as a side quest or a one-shot, a new subclass fitting with the theme, and 20 magic items that reinforce the theme. So 160 magic items total. The art in here by the author Ali Smith, a patron of the Mystic Arts, and their team of collaborators and other artists is amazing. And it's all human-made and it looks gorgeous. So gorgeous, in fact, that I'm not being paid for this sponsorship. I love the art here so much that I asked the author to draw some pieces for the broadsheet I'm releasing on Patreon in return for talking about it in a video. They're an indie developer and this is their first book, but let me tell you, you wouldn't be able to tell that by the quality. Go do yourself a favor and pick it up by the link in the description below. I watch Lord of the Rings every year around the holidays, and I can't wait to do it again this year. When I was little, my parents introduced me to the Lord of the Rings films, specifically the extended edition DVDs, and we watched them over the course of a week, 1 DVD a night. It was amazing. For a whole week I was transported to Middle-earth, and it became a secondary world. I didn't know it then, but I think that was the genesis of my love of filmmaking and my love of D&D. And later I watched the DVD appendices for the behind-the-scenes documentaries on there. It was like film school in a box. And now I live for that feeling of getting to spend hours visiting an alternate reality. Only, instead of Middle-earth, it's my world of Orathon. I can't wait till my next D&D session. Nor can I wait until I start my Lord of the Rings rewatch. And this time I'm going to be focusing on every time the party makes a point crawl choice. And I want you to do the same. The next time you watch the films, think about the point crawl that John, the DM, is running. You'll be surprised how frequently it shows up. And that's where we'll pick it up next time. Thanks so much for watching this video. This channel is run by me and my girlfriend. And if you want to support us directly, consider joining our Patreon and pick up our digital magazine, The Broadsheet. It's a deep dive into my campaign setting, a flintlock fantasy by gaslight setting. It's all about interwar and Victorian era intrigue in a megacity of smoke and industry, a D&D setting like you've never seen. And if you're especially generous, you might like the video, comment, share, or subscribe, and hit the bell to be notified when we release new videos. Until next time, keep studying the mystic arts.